Well, in Jesus' time, in the first century AD, there were 2 or 3 types of inns around in Palestine. The first type was the kind of inn that Greeks or Romans who were traveling would have been permitted to stay in, sort of the public house kind of inn, the kind of inn we might think of or associate with the ancient world. The second type would have been inns strictly for the use of the Jewish people. You have to remember, in the Jewish culture, there's 2 types of people. There are the Jews and there are the Gentiles. The Gentiles are anyone who is not a Jew. Now, Jews need to maintain what's called a ceremonially clean lifestyle, or we might say a kosher lifestyle. And as part of that, in the ancient world, they were not permitted to enter the home of a Gentile. They were not permitted to associate with Gentiles in the same inn. So there was the Jewish inn, and there was the inn for the Gentiles. And then there was a third type of inn, which would equate more to, I think of it like the bed and breakfast today, or maybe even more like the old-fashioned boarding house concept. This is where perhaps a widow, for example, to bring money to support herself, if she owned a house, would open the rooms of the house up and make them available to travelers, kind of like a little bed and breakfast, as I said. And then in that culture also, remember, we're dealing with a culture where a lot of the people actually lived in tents most of the time. They were a wandering people. And so these tent dwellers would actually, their idea of an inn would have been a field where they could set up their tents. So in that case, you think of the campground, the modern day campground, as kind of that type of thing. And so in the Bible story, when it says there was no room in the inn, some people feel that that may actually mean that there wasn't any room suitable in the field for them to set up a tent and have the privacy necessary to deliver a child. And so they moved into the stable. So it's not, what we think of as the Christmas story, we're really not sure exactly how that happened. But for my story, and for the sake of the modern reader, I thought it would be a lot more fun to use the sort of concept of an inn, the way we think of an inn, where everybody kind of comes together and shares a room. In this case, we might be thinking more like a medieval inn or an early American inn where people would come in. They might share beds, they might share rooms, not the modern sense of privacy at all. And then that type of inn is the one that gets overcrowded. There's no room in that inn, but there's a stable in back. And so in the end, Mary and Joseph are permitted to use the stable.